this to me is like the really fascinating material.
We don't know what the answer is, but we're looking for patterns.
I think we're looking at kind of a type of cosmic alchemy.
The story slowly mythos.
Still, a lot of people don't know that this technology actually exists.
The possibilities here are pretty
We
mind-boggling.
can't just believe that it was the work of these lone troubled individuals.
And like a conspiracy theorist would look at that and say, well, the Illuminati or somebody planned this right
Now,
away
is that
in advance.
or is that by design?
Looking for meaningful coincidences.
The same pattern.
So what do you call your show?
It's Conspirinormal.
Oh, okay.
So we
And you have been on how long?
we've been around for 6 years. Over
Oh my
6
goodness.
years. Yeah.
And you just asked me now to be on the program? How have you been? And you do it what, once a week?
Yeah, we do it once a week. Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, getting those guests is you try to get the best guests, and once in a while we had John Lear scheduled to go on our show, and he never answered. I don't know why.
Oh, really?
I know he's been ill, so I give him the benefit of the doubt,
Well,
and
listen,
we have two hosts and plenty of guests in the background, so.
well, I listened to some of your to one of your shows. You had
Yes.
Peter Robbins on.
Oh, yeah.
Talking about him and his sister Helen Wills. I know Peter pretty well.
Yeah.
I got to know him very well. I went to Ithaca and stayed a few days with him last year.
Wonderful. Yeah, he's a friend of mine. He comes into the city a couple of times a year, and we have Indian food together.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I got to.
Yeah.
The year before that, a friend of mine and I flew to New York and to the city, and it just happened that he was going to be there, so he gave us a tour around like Lower Manhattan, which was really cool. Peter definitely knows his way around. He's I guess are you born in New York City? Are you originally from there?
From New Jersey. Well, about 30 miles away.
Okay.
But as soon as I got in my teens, I came over here, and
Sure.
I saw no reason really to go back. I mean, it was a totally. I disliked the high school, and the kids were boring and knew nothing in those days. I mean, they really had no a grasp of reality or unreality, to be honest with you. And I came over here, and it was a totally different setup, And I said, "Geez, this is a little bit." And of course, it was the '60s. I guess I first hit the streets of Manhattan. Must have been around 1966 or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. So you've been there
So,
good while. Yeah.
I have. I've been in the same place 40-something years. Actually, maybe longer than that. 1972, I moved in here, and
Wow.
but in those days there was nobody in the neighborhood. It was like at 6 o'clock, the block and the surrounding blocks shut down. There wasn't even a bar. I mean. Well, there was downstairs. There was a piano bar, but she went out of business, and that was it. There was nothing here. And now on one corner we have a high rise that's going up to 65 floors, and on the other corner of Madison Avenue it's 55 floors, and there's one across the street that I have no idea how tall that's going to be. And there's a vacant lot right next to me where the New York Fortean Society used to hold their meetings, and
Nice.
I don't know if it got condemned, but they tore down the building and made a big giant lot, but they've never built on it, which is okay with me because otherwise the building would shake and it would be even dustier than it is. I mean, I'm totally allergic to dust, and I'm surrounded by like 5,000 books and 50 file cabinets. I mean, it's just it's dreadful. Dreadful.
Did you? We have started. I mean, I'm just like a little bit of banter. Did you own a bookstore?
No, but I ran one of the first metaphysical centers in New York. Well, I can't even tell you the. All this stuff is so many years ago. I mean, I just turned 71. It's no secret. So we're talking about things that happened a half century ago. Sometimes your memory fades, and sometimes you went out at night and it faded the next day pretty quickly, you know. But we started the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences, which was one of the first, if not the first, metaphysical center in the country. And we had classes and workshops on everything from how to use herbs, how to use the Ouija board safely, astral projection classes and tarot. We had Saturday night seances, and we had like a classroom set up. It was a nice size loft, and in those days, rents were reasonable, to say the least. Today, I don't know how you could possibly do anything like that, you know. So we brought in speakers from all over the country. You know, there was more of a touring situation where speakers and authorities on various subjects would go from town to town, especially the UFO contactees, you know, the people that claimed that they had gone for rides in flying saucers, usually from the West Coast. They would hop on a Greyhound and move around and give their lectures and show their slides. And of course, everybody says, "Oh, you know, they're doing it for making the money." Well, for making money. Well, believe me, there was no money. They slept on the couches on you know, people in people's homes, and you know, waited for a free meal here and there, and like I say, traveled from town to town on a Greyhound bus. There was no lavish lifestyle going on there. They felt that they had to get the word out, whatever the word is. You know, when people say, "Well, did you believe their stories, or do you believe their stories?" Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm a book publisher. I've actually been fairly successful. I've got 305 titles. And back in the 80s, it was mind-blowing. I mean, anytime you put out a book, you could sell 2,000-3,000 copies in a couple of months and reprint. Today, the field is much more crowded, and of course, you've only really got one or two marketplaces. But even though I'm semi-retired, I put out 3 new titles a month. So I still
That's
keep,
a lot. Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, like I said, we have 305 titles. Now, these are not books that I've necessarily written myself, but I have pretty much a hand in everything. And then also, I edited over the years 30 different newsstand magazines, some of them on UFOs. I had a UFO newspaper called the UFO Review that lasted, I guess, for maybe 8 or 10 years. We called it the official flying saucer newspaper, the UFO Review, and that had a pretty big circulation. I mean, we got about 35,000 copies out on the newsstand all over the country. And then I did a magazine for a larger publisher called UFO Universe, which was lasted for 11 years until the bottom of the magazine publishing business just collapsed. One morning, I got a call from the publisher saying, you know, like we're going, you know, we're going bankrupt, and it wasn't because of UFO Universe. In fact, that was doing relatively well because it didn't cost any real money to put out, you know. But the newsstands, well, you know, for a fact, how many bookstores are there? I mean, just a handful outside of Barnes and Noble, and the newsstands, you can't find a newspaper here. I mean, we used to have big newsstands in New York where you could go and buy newspapers from all over the world.
Yeah, you see all that in the movies and stuff, like the older movies. Yeah,
it doesn't exist. I have to walk 3 blocks to buy a copy of the New York Post. You know, you know, everything's changed. The publishing business has changed greatly over the years, but we do it because we like the topic. I like publishing, even though it can be a frustrating occupation. And I believe that people should have the opportunity to read a variety of literature. So people ask me, well, you know, do you believe in all the books that you publish? Well, no publisher does. I mean, you know, the big publisher that puts out Mein Kampf or the Communist Manifesto or something, yeah, you know, he puts it out because you believe in the right to people to read, you know, literature. I mean, we do have that's one of the amendments of the Constitution that a lot of people have forgotten about. And anyway, so we do publishing, and people buy the books, and some people that are in the field are in the field because they like to be entertained, and that's fine with me too. And other people because they want to make a serious study of it. I find myself kind of somewhere in between. I mean, my opinions, which are subject to change over the years, are varied. To be honest with you, most people expect me to say that I think that all flying saucers come from outer space, and the truth of the matter is, I think dreadfully few of them do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you're pretty.
Yeah.
Like I've heard a couple of interviews with you, and you pretty much ride on where I am on this whole UFO subject. That there's a lot more going on than just little green men from Zeta Reticuli. Yeah. I mean, for sure.
There is obviously a physical evidence. Dr. Hynek and several other researchers used to collect soil samples and go to places like Socorro, New Mexico, where Lonnie Zamora, the police officer, saw the object land, and they had impressions in the ground. So these objects can be physical at times, but other times they are literally like will-o'-the-wisps. They come and they go, and people ask me, what's my opinion on UFOs? And I say, well, it doesn't really matter what my opinion is because they act independently of my feelings and anybody else's, for that matter.
At any given time, you're right, yeah.
The
phenomenon throws you a loop most of the time.
Well, just when you think you might be onto something, you're not. Now, I do believe, a lot of this is, like I say, I would call it singular phenomena. I mean, people are looking at to think that we're looking for a group of the same thing. But sometimes things happen in nature and in the world that are singular, that will never happen again. And there's no rhyme or reason for it. It just is. And so you're kind of wasting your time searching for a reason. It's like, parapsychologists that are out there to try to move objects and say, well, we know that this happens, but you can't create it for the most part in a laboratory. And when you do, it seems suspicious some of the times. It's not. It reproduces itself when it wants to in its own way. And one thing that happens in North Dakota may not be the same to something that happens in Connecticut, even though it may make the same appearance. I mean, that's just my thinking on it. And then I think that some of what people see is what we would call a secret technology. Now, I'm sure you've discussed Project Paperclip on your show, since it is.
Oh yeah. We've talked to Nick
Yeah.
Redfern about a lot of that. Some of his ideas on what happened in Roswell and all that. Yeah.
Well, okay. Now, I don't believe it has anything whatsoever to do with the Russians. I don't know how he come up with that conclusion, or the Japanese. I think I just feel that here we brought all these Nazi sympathizers and Nazis over. They went to work for developing rockets here, and we do know that they had a different sort of technology that they were working on, which might have been based upon channeling sessions that several mediums got from some other star system or something. I mean, that's speculation, but that's the way the story goes. So they brought these scientists over who pretended to, love America, and they weren't. They were Nazis, and they developed this formula for rocket propulsion and space travel, and it was kept a secret. So there were two forms of two space programs being developed at the same time. One that we know about, using a fuel that will take you to the moon with great thrust, even though we haven't really been back. I mean, which seems kind of peculiar. And then there's this secret technology that's been going on behind our back, perhaps at Area 51 or Pine Gap or other places. Now, why this hasn't been made known is somewhat of a mystery, except maybe there is something to the concept that there's a secret government. I'm not sold on it. I'm not a big believer in the Illuminati ruling the world and the reptilians. The queen, turns into a reptilian. I don't swallow that for 1 minute. Now, there may be reptilians. I'm an old fan of the Shaver mystery, if you're familiar with that. Richard Shaver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to get Tim Swartz on to talk about that. He's apparently like an expert on that.
Well, now I knew Shaver.
Did you? Wow.
Oh yes, by all means, yes. Well, I cut my teeth. All right. How I got started writing. When I was 14 years old, I went out and I purchased a mimeograph machine and started printing a newsletter. It was called the Interplanetary News Service Report. And the first issue that I printed was 75 copies, and it was, I think, about 10 pages long. And in those days, there was no quick copy or any fancy equipment or anything. You set up an ironing board, you stacked the paper, and you collated it by hand and stapled it, put a label on it, and took it to the post office. Not much different than we do today, to be honest with you, but it was, at least the printing is a little bit better. And the ink was all over the house. I mean, it looked like a crime scene, except that the fingerprints were in black ink instead of red ink. And my mother threw me out of the house, and I had to work on the back porch, where it was damn cold in the winter. But I continued on with my follies to
That's
the point
dedication,
where,
Tim. That's dedication.
Dedication. Yeah. And I was a teenager. I started at 14 or around then because I had a couple of sightings when I was 10 of UFOs over the house. So I continued this on to the point where it got too much to do. The newsletter started becoming 30 or 40 pages, a lot more collating, and we had a circulation of about 1,500.
Wow.
And in fact, Nightcap, which was the large UFO organization, Major Kehoe ran, he had, he had 7,000 or 8,000 members. Then there was APRO, the Jim and Cora Lorenzen down there in Tucson, and they had about 1,500 or 1,600 members, but they were a little bit more open-minded. They where Kehoe was only interested in pilot reports and police officers chasing UFOs. The Lorenzens translated a lot of the foreign clippings, and they included humanoid sightings and stuff. And I was more sympathetic to their cause, even though they were not the friendliest of folk. But we were pretty much up there. In circulation and in notoriety. And then a friend of mine, Jim Mosley, had a magazine called Saucer News. For some reason, he was on the Long John Neville show. That was the first paranormal program that was on all night. And the big flap of what was a 65 hit, the swamp gas in Michigan, and suddenly the subscriptions to his magazine, he had 10,000 subscribers. So he bought me out. He didn't offer me any money, but he took over my subscriptions and he hired me as managing editor of Saucer News. And I started going to New York every day to work at a small office right around the corner.
And you were how old at this point?
Well, I would have been under 20.
Okay.
I can't tell you. Let me see. That would have been about 1967, 68, I believe. So under 20. Then I started along the line. In addition to running the Occult Center, I started promoting rock and roll shows. I mean, nothing fancy, no Rolling Stones or Grateful Dead or anything.
And I definitely want to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
But
nothing fancy is good. We're from Nashville, so we're really heads in.
We had bands. We had bands in New York, like the Magic Tramps, the Harlots of 42nd Street, and the big band would have been the New York Dolls.
Yeah.
They were kind of the first glitter band. Well,
I'm a big New
Arthur,
York Dolls fan, by the way, Tim.
well, there you go. Well, Arthur Kane, the bass player, known as Killer Kane, was a good friend of mine. He and his wife Barbara used to come to our UFO conferences, and the band had finally gotten together after 30 years, and he had invited me backstage. They were playing at Randall's Island, and I wondered, like a day or two before the event, why he hadn't gotten in touch with me and let me know, where I should go to pick up my backstage pass and all. And somebody called me like at 2:00 in the morning and told me he passed away. He died on my birthday. So, I mean, that's something I can't, forget. But we did have his very lovely wife, Barbara Kane, on our show, Exploring the Bizarre. So we talked about punk rock with Peter, because his sister was Helen Wheels.
Oh, yeah.
Performed with a boa constrictor and wrote some of the music for Blue Oyster Cult. And then we talked to Barbara Kane about glitter, which was glitter and glam. In fact, I was on Edgar Winter's Frankenstein album,
Hell yeah.
which went platinum. Now, I'm not a musician. However, there is a song on the album called We All Had a Really Good Time. The record company locked us in a recording studio with about 3 bottles of Jack Daniels. It was me, Bette Midler, I think Rick Derringer, a couple of guys from the Chambers Brothers, got us all drunk. And if you play that song on the Frankenstein album, you'll hear party noises and clapping and whoopee. And so I'm on there somewhere clapping my hands and rattling my keys. But it's a platinum album. So, there you, and of course that was the album where Edgar, who was basically a blues player, dressed up all in glam, with the eyeshadow and the glitter on his face and the whole bit. He absolutely hated that. But I guess somewhere along the line, the record company told him that was the thing that was happening, and that was going to make him popular and rich. And it made him popular. That's for sure, because that album they still play the song.
Oh yeah. You hear it a lot.
Well, yeah, I hear it a lot. And so there you go. I've had a career that has varied, and then of course I've made movies too. I'm known as Mr. Creepo. I make a low budget, or I haven't done this in a while, low budget horror movies. Now everybody else is making them, and you can't get any decent distribution on it. You got to throw it on Amazon and make $20 a month or something like that.
What were the titles of some of the movies that you made?
Okay, well now here, this kind of ties in. One of them was called Sandy Hook Lingerie Massacre Party. Nothing to do whatsoever with the Sandy Hook in Connecticut. It's the Sandy Hook in New Jersey, which is the real Sandy Hook. In fact, I did a little research on this. There are 9 Sandy Hooks in North America, 8 in the continental U.S., and 1 in Canada. So it's a rather popular destination depending upon where you live. Well, for some reason, Alex Jones, on his website, he got apparently an email from someone who had a copy of the Russian version of Sandy Hook. And when you look at the video, when you look at the Batman video, the Batman and the Gotham
Dark
City
Knight.
Mirror,
Yeah.
You're looking at the map and it says Sandy Hook on it, and he saw the movie on the same day he saw that in the Batman. It didn't even make any sense to me, and it still doesn't. But when the movie was re-released like 3 or 4 years ago, we changed the name of it, because they were even claiming that the lead actress, Debbie Rochon, was one of the so-called actors in the supposed.
Really?
It just boggles the mind. I mean, Alex Jones will just make anything up. I mean, and that kind of turned me bitter against him and David Icke and all, because there are conspiracies, but when you see everything as a conspiracy, it kind of blows away the ones that are real.
Yeah, they're hustlers. Obviously they're just hustling.
Yeah. Well, you can be, it's the way you present it. Alex Jones gets on there and he rants and he raves. You can have you and I both on our shows have guests on, and they have a variety of opinions.
Yeah,
and
we don't have to
sometimes
agree.
no, and sometimes the guest may have some evidence, and sometimes you just think, well, this guy, where is he getting this from? I mean, if you want to believe that we didn't go to the moon, we could believe that. Do you think we went to the moon?
I believe that we went to the moon. Yes. I think the real question is what you asked earlier, why we didn't go back to the moon.
That is a key question.
Yeah.
And I think that there may be some problem with the dating on the event. There's a oh my goodness, I'm gonna slap myself for not remembering the guy's name.
I'm a moon agnostic.
Yeah, I can't. I knew Edgar Mitchell and Gordon Cooper. I wouldn't call him a close friend, but we talked on the phone a couple of times, and he chastised me once because he thought that I had said on the radio that he had seen the alien bodies at Roswell. Well, I never said that he said that. But what he had said on the Merv Griffin show is that he had been told stories about people who had seen, alien bodies and all of that. Speculation type of stuff. And that's what I said. But somehow it was like playing a game of telephone where everything had just kind of gotten, twisted around. But he did tell me about his real UFO sightings that he had while he was stationed in Germany. On several days in a row, they chased, and he was one of the pilots, a whole flotilla or formation, or maybe it was just 6 craft, I don't know. But they went up and they chased these objects that were being picked up on radar, and they were quickly outdistanced by the UFOs. And then, of course, there was an incident at Edwards Air Force Base where supposedly he was showed a film that somebody had taken of an object on the ground with a tripod landing gear. And some people say, no, it was a weather balloon, and he got the story wrong. And it's part of UFO mythos. These stories are out there, and some of them are more speculative than others. But they're all kind of fascinating. Over the years, like I say, I've done all these other things, but somehow I've always managed to float back to the one subject that I kind of like the most. And I kind of am depressed when, a lot of guys get into the field and think that they're going to find a solution, in 6 months. Of course, this went on more so in the old days, the pioneering days of ufology than today. I think now we realize that there's no one single answer to any of this.
Tim, what kind of your association with John Keel? I mean, what kind of influence did he have on your thinking? Because I know that Keel is pretty much cited as one of the first to kind of bring this whole the whole idea that we're dealing with something a lot more than spacecraft, that there's something a lot more to it.
Well, that is true to some degree, but there were others. If you read some of the early issues of Fate magazine, they had a fellow who believed that UFOs were space animals or creatures that were alive in the living in the atmosphere. There was Meade Lane, who had an organization called the BSRA, Borderland Sciences Research Association, and they were channeling beings, and they thought that they were interdimensional. In fact, the so-called landing at Edwards Air Force Base that Eisenhower supposedly witnessed and conversed with these aliens, it was because of Meade Lane and the BSRA that this information originally came out. There was a fellow, I believe a pseudonym, you can look on the internet, you'll find the original letter that he wrote to BSRA and Meade Lane about the incident that took place, and he said that Eisenhower had been contacted, and there were several other witnesses to the event which is not usually brought out. And one of them was a Catholic priest, I believe. And these people are all named in the affidavit. And of course, Eisenhower, they claimed that he wasn't at any meeting with aliens, that he had been called away to a dental appointment. He'd been playing golf. I know why all presidents play golf. He was playing golf, and he got a toothache, or a wisdom tooth was bothering him up. So they took him somewhere to get his teeth worked on when he was supposedly meeting with aliens. So I don't know. That's the story. The story's there, and you can accept it or not. It's one that's lasted, and I do believe that there have been cases where these beings or entities have infiltrated society, because some of them actually are said to be shapeshifters. They can disguise their identities, and they could be living and walking right amongst us. In fact, I'm working on a book, one of the 3 for next month, called Alien Underground Alien Bases, although all the bases are not underground. And we have hidden in plain sight a chapter where we talk about these supposed UFO or alien conclaves that are right in plain sight, but people are just not aware of who's living in that complex up in the mountains there somewhere. Oh, but to get back to John Keel, he lived in the neighborhood here. I mean, about maybe 6 blocks away. And we went to the movies together. We socialized. I mean, it wasn't all just UFOs.
Sure.
In fact, he always said he didn't like ufologists as because they had no other interest. And just quizzed them day and night on all of this. And he was a poet. He wrote a lot of other things, and he was a comedy writer for a couple of TV shows and all. He was a
really. I didn't know that about him.
Yeah. Well, he wrote. Now let me think of this. What's my line to tell the truth?
Really?
He was involved in that. Yeah. And anyway, he had a lot of other interests and things that he did. I guess it all kind of started for him when he went down to West Virginia. Now, we think of West Virginia and John Keel as Mothman territory, Point Pleasant and the collapse of the Silver Bridge and so forth. But he had actually gone down there. He was writing a column for a national newspaper syndicate, and he went down there to investigate the case of a flying cat, or a cat with wings. In fact, which I've written about it, that you could find on the internet too. I mean, the cat had what looked like wings, and they found them in a tree. So I guess they thought he flew up there, but as we know, cats can usually climb up a tree and can't get down, and that seemed the problem. And then the cat disappeared. I mean, it was a kind of a wild story in itself. And while he was down there, I guess the Mothman sightings broke. And then he went back and revisited the area several times, and got in touch with Mary Heyer, and had meetings with Woody Derenberger, the contactee, who said that he had met up with Indrid Cold from the planet Lanulos.
Yep. And
then they began calling his hotel room late at night. It was a whole wild story, but he seemed really... Now, they were even invading his apartment. I mean, these entities and all. I mean, he claimed that they would walk through the door. I don't know whether the door was open or closed. I can't remember. And go underneath the sink and disappear. There's a cabinet that kind of opens up, and they would crawl through. And I've heard other stories that are similar to that. There's a case in one of our books that took place, may still be going on now, in the Black Forest of Colorado, where this fellow had all sorts of paranormal phenomena in his home, and they were taking photographs of the streaks of light and weird balls of light outside the house, and things that you can't explain, and a lot of witnesses and people talking, but there's nobody there. And he claimed it was the CIA, and that he saw them actually going into the neighbor's doghouse. I mean, that sounds totally crazy, but
You never know, man. You never
yeah,
know.
and the guy CIA, no, but maybe some other organization. I mean, CIA, they don't wear, unlike the FBI, they don't wear suits, they don't have badges. They can tell you CIA till you're blue in the face. How do you prove it?
Yeah, how do you know? Yeah.
So if you
Yeah.
lean
Yes.
more towards ultra terrestrial versus extraterrestrial, but you still believe that there are elements of like a secret space program that probably have some kind of connection to these beings, entities, whatever you want to call them. What would their goals be?
I don't know if there's a connection necessarily between the two of them. I don't know. I mean, you
kind of alluded to that though, because you said that.
Well, I mean, some people claim that there's 71 types of aliens visiting Earth. Well, I think that's preposterous. What is this? Here, Shorty? I mean, we got to have a police line up and pick them out or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe one group knows the other group, or some groups know some other groups, and some don't know anybody. Now, I think I've speculated recently. I did a book called the Matrix of Philip K. Dick and the
that looked very interesting.
Synchronicities.
I want to check that out.
Well, that's my favorite book that I've written in the last couple of years. Now, that sucker is like 450 pages. I've had probably 40 or 50 synchronicities, and I'm not just talking about thinking of somebody and they call on the telephone the next day. I mean, we're talking about stuff that's just absolutely bizarre and out of control. Now, Philip K. Dick, who of course was a science fiction writer, he believed that we were living in some sort of computerized simulation,
right,
which is kind of strange in itself because he never owned a computer, which I find kind of funny right there. But if you go to YouTube, and I think this is also on one of our clips on one of our shows, because we've had he was married 5 times. We've had one of his wives, Tessa Dick, on the program, and he was attending a science fiction convention back in 1977, I think it was, in France. Now, if you know anything about science fiction people hate ufologists and paranormal researchers and conspiracy buffs. They think we're all a bunch of a bag of mixed nuts. I mean, and the reason is because they have no intelligence of their own. They are told by their hierarchy, Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke and Ray Bradbury, that there's nothing to any of this. Because if there was anything to any of this, why would anybody buy their stupid science fiction?
Or they might have to write more interesting books.
They would indeed, yes. And no offense to people who enjoy that.
I love all that stuff. It's still classics, but
they're probably not listening to our conversation anyway. They're watching Star Trek or something,
Yeah.
But anyway, he appeared at this science fiction convention in France, and they were having a press conference, and he sat in front of the microphone there, in front of the audience made up of critics and writers, and I guess just fans, and said that he believed that we were living in a multi-universe, and that there was other existences, and sometimes we could be in one existence, and sometimes we could be in another. Well, his stories that are on TV, The Man in the High Castle, I mean, and of course all these other. What was it? Blade Runner, but also Total Recall. That was based on one of his stories, right? And he some people thought he needed to take his meds, right? And the science fiction people thought that he was absolutely nuts. But last laugh is on him because he's more popular now than ever before, and he did leave a kind of a hard life. I mean, it wasn't very easy for him. Like a lot of writers and all, he began to get bigger and more recognized towards the end of his life. In fact, the first movie, which I think was Blade Runner, he never even saw the completed version of it. He had passed away maybe he had seen a rough cut or something of it, So, I think we're living in a computer simulation, or I think it's a good possibility that we are. And so what happens may have no relevance at all.
And so that's where these different things are able to come through, or we're coming into their space. Or it's this general kind of.
You got it. That's it. And if anybody that's listening to the program is going to never read any of my stuff, which is hard to believe, because we got 305 titles and have sold a couple million books over the course of 50 years, which is no Stephen King, but it's for this field, it's a pretty good shot.
Well, I would say you kind of have a consensus with a lot of. Like with people like Robert Anton Wilson, or even the influences of someone like Burroughs, or that all kind of know.
Well, you still have your Stanton Friedmans and
nuts and bolts guys.
Nuts and bolts, who want absolutely nothing to do with us. I mean, they just shun us like the plague or something like that. I don't know, which is a shame, because I'm willing to. Listen to anything that they have to say, but for 50 years I've heard Stan give the same lecture pretty much. In fact, I have a photo of him and me on the wall here. Must have been 50 years ago. He was lecturing like at NYU uptown or something like that, and it's the same story, and it hasn't proven itself out. I mean, these ships and their occupants, they don't act. Okay, you don't expect them to act exactly like astronauts landing on the moon would, but these people are entities or whatever they are just totally off the wall. I mean, they're just they're flakes. They're space nuts or so. I mean, it's just check out the literature and you'll find it's all random, and it's all strange, and it's all bizarre.
They come down and make us pancakes.
Good. And they're not even very good pancakes.
Right.
I mean,
ain't no Waffle House, man.
Yeah. Well, that's a great Joe Simonton there. I mean, that's a great. I actually had a brief correspondence with him back in that would have been 1960. I don't know, 4 or 2 or pretty early on out. And then there was the guy in John, I believe his name was Reeves, John Reeves, down in Brooksville, Florida, who walked into the swamp or into the thicket, and he met some spaceman there, and he handed him a scroll, some kind of scroll, and he went to the press or the media with it, and he unfortunately gave it to the Air Force. Now that's a no-no. And when he got it back, he claimed that the scroll was swapped out of it. Wasn't the same scroll, and they said that they had interpreted, and it says something about "we'll see you on Mars pretty soon." I don't remember the exact wording of what was on the scroll, but it, they kind of poked, fun at the whole the thing, and that's where it stands. You got now. There are some cases that do have a good degree of evidence. There's a fellow in Wyoming who I've been trying to get on my program for the longest amount of time, but his health isn't all that good. His name is Carl Higdon. Well, back in the 1970s, early 70s, I believe, he had taken off from work, and he wanted to go elk hunting. It was the opening of elk season. So he got in his 4x4 pickup truck, and he went out to a grassy knoll and got out of, parked a vehicle and got out of it, and saw a group of elk off into the distance. Well, he raised his rifle and aimed it at the animals, and everything. And then all of a sudden, everything around him went silent. It was like time had frozen. Anyway, he managed to pull the trigger, and a bullet went out, but it went out in slow motion and seemed to hit some sort of invisible barrier, because it never reached the elk, even though it was a high-powered hunting rifle. Okay, the next thing he knows, he sees this cube, fairly small cube, I don't know, 20 by 20 feet, resting on some sort of a landing gear in the grassy knoll, and in front of the cube is one or two beings, creatures, entities. They kind of look like early punk rockers. They had straw hair that stood up.
That's where punk came from. Okay.
Yeah, maybe so. Anyway, the next thing he knows, he finds himself inside the cube. And the weird thing, as if it's not weird enough, right? The weird thing is that the cube inside is much larger than the cube outside, and some of the elk have gotten into the cube in cages.
What?
Okay, well, I don't know if they walk through the whether they walk through the port door or up the ramp or what. And then he was taken to somewhere else, and he said he went into this building, and it reminded him kind of like the a Space Needle in the World's Fair, in Seattle.
Yeah.
Right. And from there, he could see out the window, and he could see people moving on the street, or the streets were moving. It was kind of like a ramp, that we have now in the airport, but this was long before that. And some of them were human, and some of them were these guys with the straw hair. And then they put him up on a device, kind of like something you would weigh, somebody on in the old days, a giant scale, except that he could hear some motorized thing going on, and it seemed to be scanning his body. Well, eventually he ended up back in the ship, and over the vehicle, or the area where the vehicle was parked, but somehow the vehicle had moved or had been teleported from the grassy knoll into the swampy area. And when finally he managed to get on the radio and reach the sheriff's office, they had to come out with not one but two tow trucks and put logs and chains and the whole bit down to get his truck out of the marshy area. And I talked to him on the phone. In fact, I talked to his wife recently. I tried to get him on the program. He wrote a little booklet after 50 years describing this, but his health hasn't been good. But I would consider that. Well, also too, when he was examined in the hospital, because he did have some problem with his vision and all. His face was all red and the whole bit. They found that he had once had like some scars on lung tissue or something to that effect, and they were gone. The X-ray showed that he had been healed of this. So you've got all this evidence, the twisted bullets and the truck being teleported into an area where he couldn't possibly drive. And so, I mean, there's an abduction experience where there is some evidence. I would say that it's a good chance that it actually took place.
Tim, you've also talked a lot about your synchronicities that you've experienced, and I know that you see these as pretty profound and kind of an answer to some of this stuff, that there's more going on.
Well, again, it's a lot of it's a lot of strange tripping out, but I don't know necessarily what the message is. Now, in the book, we do talk about some cases that involve like proof of life after death, but that's a whole new. Well, here's a synchronicity now that I call it the June 24th enigma. Kenneth Arnold, who coined the term for the most part flying saucers. We all know the story. I'm not going to get into that. 1947 Cascade the Mountains, Mount Rainier in Washington State,
Yes.
nine crescent objects and the whole bit. Well, he didn't believe that. First of all, he had about 6 or 7 other sightings. I've had his granddaughter on my program twice now. He believed. Oh, okay. June 24th. I call it the June 24th enigma. It's the day where more deaths of ufologists have taken place over the years than any other day that we know of. About 15 researchers, including Frank Scully, Jackie Gleason, who had a massive UFO and occult book collection, A French.
Really?
About
Huh.
15 people have passed away on that day. The day of the Kenneth Arnold's anniversary of his sighting. Okay, that's pretty strange. In it, Frank Scully was another one. Frank Edwards, publisher. Okay, well that's pretty strange in itself, but you could say it's a coincidence, right? Well,
Sure.
now if you talk to his granddaughter, or if you read what he really believed about UFOs, Kenneth Arnold thought that at least some of them were actually vessels that were coming from the other side being, the other world after death, coming over to retrieve the souls of humans and take them back.
That's interesting.
So I mean, if that isn't proof, maybe that he was onto something. I don't know what was. And again, it's a really weird synchronicity, at least as far as I'm concerned. It's not like waking up and seeing 444 on the clock, or something where people think that has some great significance or other. Now, I'll tell you a story here that I think is one of my most bizarre. We were talking about earlier about this organization in Tucson, long since out of business, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO. Both Carl and Jim Lorenzen passed away many, many years ago. I don't, late 70s, early 80s, something like that. I don't remember the exact date. And their files have kind of scattered all over. Nobody knows where they are. They might have had a son or a daughter. They're not interested in the subject whatsoever. They were kind of embarrassed, I think, that their parents were even into this at all. Well, I happen to know the librarian for the organization. His name is Alan Benz. He still lives in the Tucson area, and he used to correlate the files for APRO. Okay, so one day he has a little UFO group. Actually, it's a fairly big group on the internet. And he has, every year, he has like a closed inner circle meeting of people that are friends of his. And he invited me to speak one year. I'd been out there a couple of times. And so I have friends in Tucson. Outside of my New York humble abode, I would say I probably know more people UFO related in Tucson than anywhere else, because I've been out. My friend Brad Steiger used to live out in Arizona.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
one weekend, I decided while I'm out in Tucson, I want to spend the time to interview Alan Benz about his dealings with the group APRO. Now, he had also been involved in the early stages of Steve Spielberg's movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Columbia Pictures, I think it was, or Paramount, had called APRO, and I guess they didn't want to be bothered with it. They didn't obviously know how big the movie was going to be, and this was before Dr. Hynek's involvement with the film. So they had their librarian, Alan Benz, talk to them talk to the production company on the phone, and send them whatever literature that they needed. So I spoke to Alan for maybe 3 or 4 hours about this, because I was curious, nothing that too many other people would be. And finally, I closed shop there in Tucson and went with my friend Charla, who I often visit, and we go down to Sedona, which of course is has been a hotspot for UFO activity and for multi-dimensional sightings and incidents and things along that line. And it's about a 5-hour drive from Tucson. And we didn't tell any beautiful country. I mean, some of the most beautiful country in the Southwest there. We didn't tell anybody where we were going. It wasn't really any of their business, and nobody really inquired. And it's a nice drive, and we're kind of relaxing as we go down. We stopped, I think, at one point. I don't know for that trip or not, to see Chris O'Brien, who was living in Jerome, and Jerome, Arizona, is said to be the most haunted, city in the country or something like that. Okay, so we get to Sedona, and we're still in time for brunch. I guess it was a Sunday, if I would imagine, Saturday or Sunday, I can't remember which. And we stop in and we have our Bloody Mary, just one, mind you, and we eat outdoors, and it's beautiful, beautiful weather. And then finally we go and we pay our bill, or I paid the bill, and I've had other. The name of the restaurant is the Coffee Pot. They serve 103 different kinds of omelets. I mean, you can get down to like 100. Number 101 is like peanut butter and pineapple. I mean, it gets a little. It gets a little. It gets a cream cheese and jelly, or it gets a little gross out as you go down the menu, But you can get an exotic omelet. I've never seen a place with 101 omelets before, and I don't know if I want to. But okay, so we finish our brunch and we go out into the parking lot, and Charlotte is doing the driving, and it's not parallel parking. It's the kind of parking where the cars just stick out of the between the lines. I don't know, when you get a car, like you park in a parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so we go to get into her vehicle, and there's a car parked next to us that's sticking out a little bit further than possibly it should be. And we happen to glance at the license plate, and I have the photo in my book. In fact, I have it on my desk here. What does the license plate say? APRO. APRO. How in the hell do you manage that? First of all, like I say, the organization has been out of existence for 30 years. Nobody knew that we were going there. Even if anybody knew we were going there, how the heck would they know where to park next to us? That's just like blowing. That's like a 1,000.
Yeah.
I mean, and the experiences that I have in the book, there are about 40 of them. They're all like that. We're not talking about, thinking of somebody and they call on the phone the next day. We're talking about hardcore synchronicities. Now, some people think that somebody is planning, your destiny or setting these synchronicities up. There was a fellow, he's deceased now. In fact, almost everybody good is deceased. His name was John C. Lilly. He wrote a book on communicating with dolphins. Well, he also talked to aliens.
Was he the one that did the experiments with ketamine?
That's right.
The altered states was
ketamine and LSD.
That is some weird stuff, man. It's like you talk about
Echo, Earth Distance Control Office.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody, unless you wanted to talk to aliens, but you might get a giraffe instead. I don't know.
Take like 20 hits and get in an isolation chamber. Yeah.
You take 20 hits. I sure did. Okay, I'm not. Anyway, I tried that once. I wouldn't go near that again. I'll tell you that. Yeah. It's like you're frozen in time or something. I don't know. My date for the evening fell into a trash can or something. She didn't think she could get out. We weren't talking to aliens.
I had an old hippie friend of mine tell me, man, sometimes it's not a bad trip or a good trip anymore. It just is.
Yeah, I know. I pity the animals that have to take it as a tranquilizer, man. Maybe they start talking to humans. Anyway, he believed that there was a control board that was actually setting up these synchronicities, and he had a lot of them. I mean, they're described in the book. This stuff is just like too bizarre to believe. I was on my way to Atlantic City, where I'm going tomorrow, actually. Don't even gamble. I just like to go because I like to look at the ocean, and it's a nice ride, and you can get a room for $50. I mean, it's like unheard of. Okay, so I'm going down with my friend Maria DeAndrea, the psychic, who's written out a dozen books for us. And we chit-chat and take a nap on the bus the whole bit. But finally you get to Atlantic City, and you start going down some of the side streets. Now, about a block or two before you get to the hotel, there is a bed and breakfast, and on the roof of the bed and breakfast are statues of the Blues Brothers, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, right? Well, we all know, or we should know, that of course that Dan Aykroyd is a big UFO buff. In fact, most people don't realize that in his house growing up, he co-wrote Ghostbusters because he was influenced by his grandparents who used to hold seances, and he used to watch the goings-on from
I think they
the
were
parlor.
spiritualists. Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Spiritualists, yeah, spiritualists. In fact, I think his dad wrote a book, a very good book on all of this. He may still be alive. He was the last that I heard. He's also a comedian. Okay, so I stopped to tell the bus is going by, and we're looking at the Blues Brothers, and I mentioned to Maria all of this, and Ghostbusters, and she knew some of that. And he was financially backing to some degree the Mutual UFO Network for a while. He did a video on UFOs. Okay, so we get to the casino, and when you get out of the casino, you get off the bus, they give you a voucher. And you take the voucher to the cashier's cage, and they give you a big $25, which you're going to lose in 2 minutes anyway. Okay, so we do that anyway, just because it's something to do. As we get up to the cashier's gate to do this transaction, there's music playing in the room, which is really the bus station. It's not a DJ or anything like that. It's like Pandora or something. Who knows? It's coming from Minnesota or Wisconsin or something. What do they start playing? The theme to Ghostbusters.
Of course.
No, unless there was a microphone hidden under our seat, or the Jeff the Talking Mongoose was sitting next to us and we didn't know it.
Yes.
Oh, that's a book. We're reprinting the old book by Harry Price.
Are you? Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Well, I almost paid $1,000 for it, but I found somebody who had a PDF, and they shared it with us, so we're adding some new material to it, and you won't have to pay $1,000 for the book. You can get it for $20 or thereabout.
Tim,
it might be up at the end of the year. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Mike Cleland and his work on synchronicities and owls and all that? Are you familiar with that?
We've had a sure. Yeah. We've talked a lot about synchronicities, because it seems like almost everybody's had one. Once you bring up the subject, nobody's had the stuff I've had. I mean, hell, I was in San Francisco one time, never been in the city before. And I had given a lecture on UFOs. This is some small group, did 300-400 people. And it was a Sunday afternoon. I was going back to New York here, and we had some time to kill. So we picked a restaurant at random to have brunch. Never been in the place. They had never been in the place. I had never been in San Francisco before. It was a whole new thing to me. So just idle chit-chat with the organizers, his wife, and a few other people. I said, I wish I had thought about it, and I had spent more time maybe calling up some of the people that I knew who moved from New York to San Francisco. And I mentioned one fellow by the name of Alan Vaughn, who used to lecture for us at the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences. And he had moved to San Francisco to become editor of a glossy magazine called Psychic, long since out of business, like everything else. But he was also somewhat of a medium and a psychic. And I always liked him because you could share a beer with him, and he had a good sense of humor. So we're talking about this. 2 minutes later, the door to the bar opens, and in comes this guy walking his dog on a leash. I look at him. He looks like Alan Vaughn. He walks over to the table. It is Alan Vaughn. And we invited him to sit down, and he said he had never been in the restaurant before either. It was just out as walking his dog, and he figured that he would stop in for a beer. So, we all got a kick out of that. That was one of my first early synchronicities that I noticed. That's the one that kicked it towards the goalpost. But here's the punchline. I said, well, Alan, this is a very peculiar set of circumstances. And so what are you working on these days? Well, he says, I'm working on a book on coincidence. So I guess this will be one of the stories in there. And lo and behold, if you can find that little book, I think it's published by Ballantine, their paperback books. It sells for sold for 50 cents or 75 cents in the day. You could probably find a dusty copy for 2 or 3 bucks. I think it's case 37 where he talks about it for a paragraph or two. That's it. Anyway, I've told my story. I've done it. You know, I mean, that's what happens. Yeah.
I got one. Did you want to ask something, Sergio?
Oh no, I think we covered it.
I got one question for you. This is dealing with the New York Dolls.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if you've seen the HBO series that was on for one season called Vinyl.
Oh, Vinyl.
Yeah.
One of my favorite. I was hoping they'd come back with a.
They did
second,
not. Yeah. I liked it a lot too.
Hotel. Was it about the hotel?
Actually, about the venue that collapsed.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, but nobody was in it.
Okay, so
and it wasn't. No, it was not during performance hours.
Like they showed, yeah.
Oh yes, in the Mercer Arts Center, they showed it in there, and they made it look like it was a large auditorium. The Dolls or none of these New York bands had that much of a following. It was a pretty small place. Made up of several rooms, if I remember, and it was attached to a really sleazy hotel. I don't want to say the name of the hotel because I might not get it correct. And it was a hangout, an after-hours bar, a hangout for drag queens and I don't know, just bizarre. You know, in those days it was Bohemia. This was, New York City, but it did collapse, but nobody was hurt because I don't think that anybody was in there.
Okay.
And it's a little different than they showed in
I was about to say, like that, I was wondering about that because I'd heard about that it collapsed. And I know the New York Dolls actually brought it down. I didn't know. That's actually what happened.
Well, with their platform shoes.
Yeah.
And their teased hair. Anyway, if anybody wants to go to our YouTube channel, which is Mr. UFO's Secret Files, I think that's the interview with Arthur Kane's wife, Barbara, is there. And, they had a lot of UFO experiences. Now, he became a member of the Mormon Church at the end.
Yes.
I think like a librarian or archivist or something like that. Mm-hmm. And we still talked on that. We didn't talk on the phone that much, but we were in touch through other musicians and stuff like that. And like I say, he passed away on my birthday and never got to perform in New York. They had gotten back together after 30 years. This British musician Morrissey, I guess, had liked the group, and he financed or organized the tour. And they were making the rounds, and they were supposed to play at Randall's Island, and he passed away, and the show was canceled, and that was it. Yeah,
I think it's just Sylvain and David Johansen, right? They're the only two that are left.
And David Johansen has always been on his own trip.
Yeah.
He never really. Arthur, tried to get in touch with him over the years to get him to do reunion shows, and he wouldn't even answer or anything.
Yeah, because I remember him from the 80s as Buster Poindexter,
I think he still performs every once in a while. The only band that's left from that era, and they used to play with some of the bands that I was managing, is Kiss.
Yeah,
they are supposedly on their final tour. I was probably backstage for more Kiss concerts than any other band, I would say.
In fact, I think Gene Simmons has a house here in Nashville, I think.
Oh, yeah, well, he's, of course, the one that, to become the most recognizable figure. Ace Frehley, I think, recently did a new, album. And Ace had some UFO incidents and things that happened to him. He told me, in fact, that's where I got the name Mr. UFO. He could never remember my name, but he knew I was a UFO guy or something. But then when I saw him years later, he didn't even remember that because he was hitting the bottle a little too much.
Did you?
It's not a secret. I mean, he recognized it. And I think he's sober, and all that.
You had some association with Bowie too, didn't you?
Well, yes. In fact, this is the next book that it'll either be this or Jeff the Talking Mongoose. It's a book on David Bowie, which is centered around my friend, the late Wally Elmlark, who was the White Witch of New York, and she wrote a column for Circus magazine, which was a glossy version of 17, aimed at maybe a little bit older audience, and she also did columns for like Melody Maker, and she was a very attractive woman, and a lot of the rock people, as we know, they had UFO experiences and paranormal experiences, and they were interested in learning about witchcraft from her. And Bowie, now he had purchased a house out there in California, and there was some demon in the swimming pool, and he had gotten in touch with her, and she gave him a formula or a spell or something for getting rid of the demon, although Angela Bowie claimed that the face of the demon was still on the bottom of the pool, if I remember correctly. And he was, of course, interested in UFOs, and was apparently editor of a British UFO newsletter when he was a kid, and had multiple sightings, and he thought that they were interdimensional and all. I talked to him on the phone a couple of times. He actually called here looking for her, for my friend Wally, and Robert Fripp, we had a couple of experiences where we went out sky watching with him, from King Crimson, and Mark Bolan, she had befriended. So that's coming out soon. Anyway, that's probably I've covered about everything I can think of at the moment.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop. I think we kept you a little bit longer than an hour. So
well, that's all right. We'll do it again another time if you would like.
Especially, I want to get more into that Bowie book. That sounds really fascinating.
Okay, all right. Well, when the book is out, we'll do a show we'll do a celebrity night if you want.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We
Yeah.
could do that. And of course, I have having published 300 books. We've got a lot. We've got other people who are conspiracy minded and UFO minded, who make very good guests. We even published. I'm not a very religious person, to say the least, but the one person outside of Frank Stranges, who's deceased, of course, who claimed that he met Val Thor in the Pentagon, is the Reverend Barry Downing, who wrote one of the first book on ancient astronauts, a kind of saying that a lot of the things that took place in the Bible may have been space people, and that the angels could have been space people, and Jesus could have risen up in a UFO to heaven or something like that. Well, he had a book manuscript that he had laying around for about 48 years. In fact, I think the original book was published even a year maybe before Van Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. And so I found out about the book, and I asked him, hey, why don't you update it a little, and I'll publish it. And we published it and got him on Coast to Coast and a few other programs, and it sold there, and it's still selling. And if you want, if anybody wants to find out about what we're doing, if we've whetted your appetite, you can go to conspiracyjournal.com and sign up for the newsletter. You can just find me, Google me, man. Tim Beckley, Beckley. I'm all over the place. There's no mystery about me. There are no secrets that have not been told. That's what I always say.
Excellent, Tim. Thank you, section out, and we'll be right back on Conspirinormal.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. Stay on the line for just a bit, and we're going to close the section.
No, it was the summer of June 2017. I don't know how I came across your guys' show. Yeah. But I was mowing the lawn and I'm just like, oh, what's this? Because, it sparked an interest, and I've always, my whole life, I've been just kind of into all these topics that you guys, and I started listening, and then all of a sudden I realized, I was like, man, there's a lot of catching up that I got to do, because these guys started all the way back, I don't know, 2015? So
2012, yeah.
Excuse me, 2012. So I went on this binge to where I was listening to a show almost every day, and with my day job, I'm on the road, so I got a lot of windshield time.
Yeah.
So it was great. So in between my sales calls and what have you, I would be just tuning in to your guys' show, and there's only so much of the same songs that you can listen to over and over again.
Yeah,
but,
I agree that. Yeah,
it's just rehashed over and over.
That's how I pretty much got into podcasting. Was delivering pizza for a long time. That you start listening to music. And I'm delivering. I've got my little CD changer. This is how far back this was. Okay, you have a CD changer in your car, and so after a while, you start getting bored with that. So I started listening to talk radio. This is when I lived in the Atlanta area, and that started brainwashing me. And eventually, I got to. I would listen to Coast at night when I was like closing up, and I heard this the guy that you've probably heard on the show. These guys that were being interviewed by George Norrie called Ghostly Talk, and I started listening to them because I wanted kind of an alternative to Coast that I didn't have to pay for. I ended up getting a subscription later on, which I don't have now. But, I would listen to these guys and they would have on all these other people. And then from there, I picked up another podcast called World of the Unexplained that I would call into those guys. And I became pretty decent friends with those guys. They were in North Carolina, so it was a little closer geographically to me. And I always wanted to do my podcast. And Dr. Future, who just called me, Future Quake was one of my favorite shows.
Sure.
And when he got off the air, he stopped doing it in 2012. I was like, well, I'm going to try to do it now. I'm going to kind of try to pick up the mantle a little bit,
Sure.
And so that's when I started. And man, my first shows were just not that good. I don't know if you've listened all the way from episode 1, but
they were raw. No, but they were good. I mean, they were raw in the sense.
Yeah.
You could see the evolution. As I was listening to the show, you could tell that you guys were picking up better equipment for the studio or what have you, and then just your whole production format. You guys were just starting to get better. And I think when Rob came on, it seemed like he really fine-tuned it for you guys. I think he really edited that.
Yeah.
So you could notice that, for sure.
Yeah, he worked a big miracle because, the guy knew what he was doing, and he didn't expect to be a part of the show, but he kind of slowly, gradually became a bigger part of it.
That's the Nashville influence because of so many audio guys here.
Right. Of which Surfiel is one of those as well.
And I got a brand new limiter, and Studio B is going to be, if not on par, at least a step higher to Robnum.
Well, Surfiel was a fan of the show. That's how he started out. Yeah.
Yeah, it was on my journey into studies of James Shelby Downard that I came across the show, and now I'm talking to some of the top Downardians of the world.
Yeah, what kind of interests me is I took a stab at it back in 2008. I had my own blog radio, and it was kind of on the not on the beginnings of podcasting, but my show that I had, it was live, and what made it hard for me, I only did like 35 shows.
Was it like a blog talk radio kind of thing?
Got it. Yeah. It was the Jaco show on Blog Talk Radio, and it's kind of funny because the shows are still out there, and I kind of just winged it, and it was just me. So I did it, like at an hour at a time and what have you. But I was kind of surprised for myself that, people would call in and I would talk to people from all over the country. And I kind of liked engaging just, random callers that I had no idea who was going to be on the other end of the phone.
Yeah.
And some of the stories were just bizarre. Now, I'm kind of a skeptic by nature, although, I'm kind of not. I always take a skeptic, if you tell me something, it seems almost too hard to believe. it's almost like I need proof, right? But I enjoy just all the wild craziness stories, the more bizarre, just like how you guys, the more bizarre, the more it blows my mind and the more enjoyable it becomes.
Yeah.
So I had people that would call in, and then I started booking some guests, and I had some notable people on the show. But what kind of fizzled me out was I needed a co-host, and my wife was like, "No way am I coming on this show." She was kind of not against it. But I tried to drag her on the show. I'm like, come on, this will be fun. And she's just like, why are you just talking to yourself into this mic and that's it? You're just like talking, so she didn't kind of get it. And I'm like, no, there's people that are listening to this show. So she was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to bed. You just keep on talking into your mic. And I'm like, all right, fine, But no, after a while, I kind of hung it up. And then, and then when I found you guys, I said to myself, hey, this is kind of like the same kind of format, the same kind of feel that I like, because, this was something that I was trying to do on my own and kind of adding a little bit, a bit of comedy to it. That's, I think, what makes you guys so real. It's just not boring and I don't know what's the words I'm trying to use here, but you guys put some flavor to it.
That's
when
part of
Luke
that's part of the skepticism too.
Luke was funny as hell. I mean, he's just
Yeah.
Here's what I like about this show. When I hear you guys just hang around and just talk, it's just like, hey, these are guys that I don't know them personally, but I feel like they're my friends and I'm hearing them talk. So whereas I may not be there in on the conversation, some of the things that are said during the course of the conversations or some of the things that are asked of hosts, I mean, it's almost like you guys are reading the audience's mind. It's just like, wow, that's a really good question. That's exactly what I was thinking. So I feel like I'm engaged into the talks, even though I'm not there. But I'm there in spirit, so to speak, no, you guys are doing a good job. It's just, I think whatever journey you guys are on, you just got to keep on going. You guys just don't give up no matter, and I don't think you guys will, but, no matter how hard it gets, just have fun with it. That's what I think makes it go. It's just having fun with it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
man.
Jaco.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I hear you because, I mean, when I would listen, before I started doing the show, when I would listen to podcasts, that's how I felt, like you're a part of the conversation. And I still listen to podcasts like every day, it's a big part of, of who I am still is actually listening to other people's shows. And I still feel that same way, I listen to Strange Familiars and Where Did the Road Go? Big shout out to those guys. They've been a big support in the past. They're like our podcast family. And like Project Archivist too, they're another part of that. But yeah, I mean, it is, it's amazing to me still just how many people that you can reach with this stuff. And to really say that, like, when I would listen to shows and, I was that guy that was inspired to do that stuff. And, I would encourage you now, if you still want to do it, fine. And you have the time, which is always important. Find somebody that you could do it with, or do it on your own. I mean, it's fairly easy to do. And it is, to me, it is rewarding, just to hear someone like yourself say something like that. It's amazing, the people that you will touch with it.
The one thing that as when I had my show, I was kind of, I don't know, thrown back a little bit, how people were kind of depending on me, so to speak, to put out another show because of the emails I was getting. And it was just like, oh, I can't wait to hear your next show. And I was just like, wow, people really want to hear this shit. It's just kind of like
Yeah,
the stuff
yeah.
I put out. It's like, is it really that entertaining? And no, you'd have certain people that would always tune in. And yeah, what did me in was really the time element. I kind of had a career change, and I moved into an executive position to where I traveled the whole country. So it kind of took me into a spot where it's like, you've got to make the time for this. You can't just say, well, I'm going to kind of do it on this day and then maybe I'll come back to it. And because one of the things is just prepping for a show, in the sense that, it was better for me if I had my materials ready to go,
Right.
and if I had somebody lined up
Right.
versus just winging it.
Right.
So I had hooked up with some people from MUFON, and the Illinois director here. He would come on my show, and we had some things that we talked about. Then I hooked up with a guy down in Texas talking about Bigfoot, and that kind of was cool. And then I had some ghost shows, and once you had some like reoccurring guests, it kind of made the show kind of somewhat go. But yeah, what kind of put the brakes on everything was just kind of my career. But now things are kind of opening up, and I'm actually thinking about maybe jump starting this thing all over again. And my brother-in-law,
do it, man.
Well, yeah, he we're kind of thinking putting a little bit different twist. He's kind of heavily into sports and sports betting per se, on football and everything. So I said to him, I go, so how are we going to do this? You want to talk about sports, and you want to talk about sports betting and everything else, but we want to talk about the weird and the bizarre. So how are we going to meld this show? And he was just like, well, nobody's doing it. I go, well,
That's
I
true.
guess it would kind of be the first of its time to talk about sports.
all the psychics and stuff to give psychics sports betting strategies.
Well, my friend Joe, I don't know if you've heard him on there. He was one of my first guests, and I used to work for him, and he has his little like ghost technology that he uses, and he's actually using it to like bet on baseball games. And so he might be a good person for you guys to have on.
Yeah,
he can kind of
yeah.
meld those two together for you.
Yeah. God, I swear this Skype is always just. I kind of lost you guys there for a second. I was losing my connection here on Spike. But
that's Skype for you.
We got you recorded good though. We didn't have any interruptions on this end.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Now you said you had some questions for us, like I think that you wanted to kind of pick our brains about.
Well, just in terms of your guys' show, I mean, it seemed like there's kind of this net of people, call it maybe a spider web of just guests and everything. It just seems like you grab one guest, and next thing you know, that guy's bringing people to you. Or how do you go about, I guess, finding guests? What's your guys' secret or whatever?
I think for me, from the beginning, because I had listened to so many shows, I knew some of these people, and I'd gone to one of the conferences that I'd gone to. I went, maybe like 4 times to the Mid-South Paranormal Convention in Louisville, Kentucky.
Sure.
And when I conceived the show, my idea, because the name is conspiracy plus paranormal, the conjunction of Conspirinormal. It's actually not an original idea, because there was a book called Conspiranoia that I pulled that from. But I liked the fact that, I wanted to talk about the conspiracy stuff and also talk about the paranormal stuff. And at the beginning, if you've heard the show, we were really heavy on the paranormal. And the UFO subject, is one of the things that kind of combines the two in a lot of ways. So I think that's why we've kind of gravitated a lot to the UFOs. Plus that's always been an interest of mine. But so in the beginning, I kind of had this list of, okay, these are the people I want to get on. I want to get these people that I've been listening to for years now. I want to talk to them myself. So someone like Adam Gorightly, you know, I'd heard him first on a show called Out There Radio back in mid 2000s. And I started listening to his podcast and was aware of him, and I was like, Adam Gorightly, someone I want to get on. There was there were a few other people in the paranormal world I wanted to get on. And as I was listening to other podcasts, I would get an idea, okay, like I want that person. And now, as I kind of told you, that there's a where did the road go, that we kind of have a little family there with those guys. And a lot of those guys, you know, I can just, because I kind of consider them friends, that I can, you know, get them on pretty much any time. So
that's good.
You know, it's just kind of an evolution, a slow evolution of development. I think there was quite a few, I mean, there was, I started listening to Ghostly Talk in like 2005, and the first Conspirinormal show was 2012. So what is that, 7 years, basically? Yeah. And so, you know, if I ever do a show, was what I told myself, these are the people I want.
Sure.
And I got them on. And so a guest would mention another person and say, okay, well, that's interesting, I'll check that out. You know, Gorightly mentioned Walter Bosley early on, and then I hear Walter Bosley on Darkness Radio. Darkness Radio was probably one of the biggest sources for me of hearing these guests. I hear Walter Bosley on, and he's never been on Darkness Radio ever again, but he's been on Conspirinormal like 8,000 times. So, you know, and I didn't realize at the time that, you know, Gorightly told me about Bosley the second time I had him on. So it's just a link that these guys know each other, you know, like, you know, Gorightly knows Greg Bishop, and they know Walter Bosley, you know, like I joked with them and said, you know, you guys, those are like, I said, you guys are like the Holy Trinity out here in California, you know, Bosley, Bishop, and Gorightly, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And it's just like whatever your line of inquiry is, you know, whatever books you're reading, you know, these people aren't inaccessible. You just write them a fucking email. Like,
yeah.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And there are some people that I've wanted to try to get on. Tumbleweeds, you don't hear anything.
Right.
There's a few that they want you to be on the radio, or they want to know, you know, how many listeners do you have? We have a decent amount of listeners, but sometimes with people you'll just hit a wall, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah, no, that's funny how it still holds true, because when I was kind of taking a stab at it, you know, for me it was like, you know, asking the girl out to prom. Oh, if she says no, she says no. But I was kind of, you know, testing myself and saying, well, you know, let me see if I can get this person on, and you know, let's try and, you know, shoot for some pretty big time people. So like, I mean, I don't know if this is a big time person, but, you know, Linda Goffrey, you know, she's kind of in my neck of the woods. She's just right across the border here in Burlington, Wisconsin. Right. So I got her to come to the show. And, you know, I was kind of surprised, you know, but again, I felt like that was kind of like not the beginnings of blog radio, but in 2008, you know, it was kind of all coming together. And, yeah, it was like kind of fun just trying to kind of get some, you know, to get these kind of people that, you know, have a background. But I really enjoyed, because I guess, you know, my kind of roots go back listening to the Art Bell show, just kind of such as your guys self and everything else like that.
Yeah,
it just,
of course,
you know,
absolutely.
You know, and having these people call in to Art, and you didn't, like I say, when you took that next call, you didn't know what you're going to expect, and what's
He had his finger on the button though.
Yeah. There was times I thought maybe he staged it up, with some of the
of course.
and I always kind of felt that. But then there were some that were just like, "Are you kidding me?" They were just so bizarre and freaky. That's what it's kind of. But no, that's like same thing. When I was doing that blog talk, I say, "Hey, call into the show," and I get these people that call in, and it's just a total. All of a sudden, it turned into like an interview. It was like somebody called in. And then I kind of just said, well, let me start asking you some questions. And then, the people are like, yeah, sure, and then all of a sudden it became an interview. And it's just like, wow, there's a lot more strangeness that's out there, going on just with
that. Sounds like that was really your strength then, to create that live kind of element, that immediacy.
Yeah, I just felt like I connected with some of the folks, that were out there that called in on my show. I had some guy from Michigan that was a part of a native tribe, and he was telling me about. He just called in and he started talking about shapeshifters, and I knew nothing about the subject. I mean, obviously, just by watching some of the shows on TV and stuff, I kind of knew the subject matter. But then this guy started talking about the Dog Man. And this guy started talking about shapeshifters and all this, and then it just got really crazy. The whole show all of a sudden turned into really crazy, and I'm just like, well, if this guy wants to continue on talking,
oh yeah,
and I'll continue on asking him questions. And like I say, some of my best shows turned out to be like that. I always felt, and
yeah, you could do that with Blog Talk. They had that.
Yeah,
they had a phone number you could call in and stuff like. We've never tried that whole thing.
Yeah.
It would be interesting though to experiment with something like that.
Yeah, it would be, for sure.
I found just last week I was kind of just like, how should I, because it's been in my mind to kind of, maybe start this thing back up again, but I was kind of kicking around the different sites that are out there, and I looked at Blog Talk again, and I'm like, do I want to go down that road? I looked at Anchor. I'm like, do I want to go down that road? So, we'll see. But if I do this, the bottom line is I got to commit the time and say, okay, if I'm going to do this, it's got to happen. I can't just do 30 shows again and just sign off. I feel like it's not doing it justice,
Well, just find one day a week. That's what we do, one day a week where we can actually get together and record it. And then the rest of the week, when you have a few minutes, you just, organize it and figure out who you want to be on the show, and if you have another person with you on the show, give them the heads up, and you guys have to read a book in a couple weeks, or, you just make a little calendar. And
Sure. Let me ask you guys this. Is there a particular, out of all the different subject matters, is there one that you guys say, well, I like this the best? This type of subject.
I'll let Adam go first, but he already knows what I'm going to say.
Oh, man. I mean, it's a lot of it is really so fascinating to me, but probably for me, the most fascinating is really looking at the UFO or the alien abduction phenomenon, really, for me. As opposed to seeing something mysterious in the sky, of looking at that as akin to a shamanic experience or some kind of religious experience. That it's just a modern day form of it. So what they say, quote unquote, alien contact experience is really just modern day religious experience. That to me is probably the most fascinating. And when you get into what ancient cultures experienced as opposed to now, that makes, I think a lot of people that have the nuts and bolts idea about UFOs and flying saucers and alien abduction, that it's all physical, it's all real. They think when someone says that they are actually denigrating it to a certain point. But the truth is, to me, that's way more fascinating than aliens from another planet. It's and there could be some. I think there really are intelligences that really do communicate with us, and that they are just part of. They're either part of us or they're just part of this planet.
Sure.
Josh Cutchin's work in looking at the Fae folk and fairy lore, that stuff really fascinates me.
Yeah,
because I think there really is something to all of that. You know what a fairy is now, or a fairy was then. That's an alien experience. His comparative stuff. I don't know if you've read any of his books, but I would recommend all three of them, just for the simple fact that Josh looks at all this and he just compares these different experiences, and he's able to come to just a really fascinating conclusion. I mentioned it in the previous interview, which you'll hear, I'm sure, with Tim Beckley, but Mike Clelland's work is also extraordinary, with the owls and with synchronicity. That stuff probably fascinates me the most. John Tinney is another, he is one of the few, actually he's the only one that I've ever seen on national television say that all this phenomenon is basically the same phenomenon. So
which is spiritual? Is that what he's getting?
Yeah, which is a spiritual thing. I started out with this stuff as coming from a more kind of a Christian point of view, and I still am, I am a Christian, of course, but there's so many different ways that you can look at this stuff.
Sure.
Like the Word of the Road Go crowd, Soraya, they got me thinking in so many different ways about all this.
Sure.
Surfiel is next.
Yeah.
Shoot, go ahead.
Synchromysticism and the down-nerdian view of life has really impacted me since I was a teenager. And I grew up listening to Art Bell. I'm a weird desert kid and everything, but starting to play the name game and go through life and accept synchronicities and let them happen and develop your own mythology is really my favorite stuff. And tying things into your own life and your own locality and the mythology of where you live and why you live where you live and those kind of things have really, especially in the last few years, created a lot of very interesting roads that have gone down and led me to become a part of this podcast, and it's been a wild ride. Let's put it at that.
Yeah, Surfiel's got some. There's going to be some interesting things coming down the pipe from Surfiel here pretty soon, I think.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of investigation, and I'm making a career change too, and getting into library science and archival stuff. So I've been really taking my first dives into just swimming in the primary resources that are available everywhere, especially in this country. And
Sure.
you can really start digging real deep if you understand the history of where you live, and if you're interested in anything weird, there's been a lot of people in a weird shit wherever you're at for a long time.
Oh, that's without, people. That's funny that you say that, because you kind of bump it into people and they're just like, where can I go find a ghost, or where can I go find something weird? And I'm just like, I think it's in everyone's backyard. You just got to go and search for it.
Yeah.
Do your research, talk to people. Now, okay, in my line of career, like I said, I'm I'm an executive, so it's not something that you bring up, when you go meet somebody for the first time, hey, have you seen a ghost lately? People are going to be like, there's the door, and I don't think I'm going to be buying from you, but, there are people that have stories. And when you get one-on-one with somebody and maybe you loosen them up with some with some drinks and some, all of a sudden now they start to say, well, you know what, this happened to me at my house or grandma, or, I was in the woods, and it's funny how a lot of that stuff kind of comes around full circle in one's own life too, if you can reflect, because I know for myself, I feel like I've got a story that I've got to tell. So maybe just, whether I'm going to write it down or how I'm going to put it out there, because I was a nuts and bolts guy when I was a kid, like a teenager in the 80s.
Oh, me too.
90s.
Me too. Yeah.
Tell you what. Now, I don't know if it's my Catholic faith, because I'm not a hardcore Catholic, but I am a Catholic, and I do am a supporter of that faith. But I will say this: I don't know if it's the older that I'm getting, I'm starting to think that there's something more to this that's a deception, maybe of sorts. I don't know. That's my own kind of belief on it, that there is something spiritual here. It all fascinates me when I hear these stories that people tell, and, on your show and on TV, but although on TV it's really hyped up, but, this format, I think you really get down to people really kind of spilling their guts, kind of really, could kind of really tell like the true story. And what I like about the podcast, there's really no money to be made here. People are just talking, and that's what I like, and
free exchange of ideas.
I just want to remind everybody, if you want to make some money for us, please go to patreon.com/Conspirinormal.
You gotta pay the bills to turn the lights on and keep it going. I don't think that.
Yeah.
But no, it's just the older I'm getting, the more I'm kind of getting away from the nuts and bolts. Whereas I do believe that exists. There are creatures
there are
out
nuts
there.
And bolts.
Yeah, there are nuts and bolts, but I don't really believe that they've got here. How the way it's portrayed. I don't know. Everything's always elusive.
Yeah.
It's like, is everything always one step away? As soon as you get close to it, it gets further outside of your reach.
I mean, do you think one of these airplanes has ever really gotten to it and shot it down? And come on.
My good friend Guy Malone, he's been a big mentor for me as well, and he puts it in the way that say like, well, there is, the universe is too big for there to possibly be no life or no intelligent life.
Right.
That is one question, but the other question is, have they actually gotten here? And that's a whole separate issue. And I don't think so. I think the simplest explanation is we're dealing with something that's already here and probably predates us. And if you want to call that angels or demons or fallen angels or whatever, that's, I think that's all up to your perspective and what you believe about it. But there's definitely, the deception part. I used to be a lot more adamant on that, to say that it's all a deception, but I do believe that there still is a part of there is that element is still there. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
There's too much, like, why do you have these supposed beings from another planet telling Billy Meyer to deny Christ? Like, what sense does that make?
Right.
So there's, but I think there's some of these other beings that they may just be neutral.
Yeah. I don't think it'd be so exploitable if it was actually some more nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
Stuff like, people wouldn't be able to use it for all their different purposes, and they wouldn't be able to stretch it this long if it was really some nuts and bolts.
Yeah,
like,
agreed. So, I mean, and when I early on had Rosemary Ellen Guiley on, this is probably like episode 30 or something, and she's someone I need to get back on, but she had written a book about the jinn, and the point that was made about the jinn in Islamic mythology is that they are just like us, and there's good jinn, there's bad jinn, and there's ones that just don't care. So, it's all these different traditions. There is definitely something to it.
Sure. What somewhat fascinates me is the power of the human mind and what we manifest. For instance, like the Slender Man.
Yes.
That on some level fascinates me. That all of a sudden something got creative out of thin air, so to speak, and it's influencing society on some level in terms of like these preteens and these teens and the Slender Man and all that. And you have that whole thing go down up in Wisconsin, and it's mind blowing.
Yeah,
the
whole tulpa kind of thing. Even though we're kind of being exploitative and not being as particular to what the cultures that have made the ideas of tulpa actually are talking about, but it's that whole us creating thought forms and us creating things that are external to ourselves and what those can do, and that's without a doubt. I mean that stuff is very fascinating to me also.
Yeah, I mean it's like what lights that spark. I mean, how is that, or I should say, what lights that fire? What gets it started?
I mean, the same thing that's created all mythology, all, everything, everywhere. I mean, it's all the same.
And then you go even deeper from tulpa to this concept of the egregore.
Yeah, coming from outside, not being created from us, but coming from outside and us inviting in.
And well, also too that there's this the concept that we can create a egregore / tulpa, but some other being can inhabit that. That was one show where it was so hard for me to get my mind around that, and that was almost like Mark Stavish in that interview. He almost like he was like a teacher, like teaching us about what was about that. It was just it was something that I had never heard of before, and I could not quite get my mind around the concept. Through him I've got a little bit of better grasp on it, but that stuff, man,
I'm still agnostic about that kind of general thing. Like the division between something from outside and something from us, and I'm very agnostic about it. I don't really think I can get a grasp of it, but it's very perplexing. It's crazy.
Well, when you have a person I don't want to get into it now, but when you have a personal experience on a religious level that like happens to you, boy, it makes you question everything that exists in life. And it's not just, for me personally, it's not a situation that happened once, but it's happened throughout my whole life where part of my faith and me have crossed paths in ways that I did not see it coming, and where I experienced some things that are kind of out of this world, so to speak, but it's just, me either seeking things out or them happening just to drop in my lap, and I say to myself, now how did that happen? And I know I'm talking kind of vague, but it's just
I understand. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing in that way, how just things have occurred, at least for me on my own life path. How I say to myself, well, is that validating or is it my mind, or what's happening here? Because I've had things happen to me on a group level where I was experiencing things with other people, and then I had things where I was experiencing them on myself. But I know for myself, personally speaking, when it comes to ghosts, and I'll just use that as a general term, that for me,
Sure.
I had an experience. So for me, it's 100% real, in the sense that, okay, they are ghosts. Now how you define it or what that means exactly, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's something that feeds off your negative energy. I don't know if that's something that is a demon. I don't know if it feeds off of you somehow in some way that we don't understand. I don't know what that is, but to have physical stuff happen to you to where you were scratched, or just like the typical stuff that you see on the ghost shows. Because I kind of laughed it off when I said, come on, watching taps or, ghost adventures. But then to have that happen to you and say, well, wait a minute, is this my mind? But then you see scratches form on your arm and you're like, well, I can't make scratches just appear on my arm. I mean, is it my mind that's making 3 scratches look like claw marks just appear on my arm? And I say to myself, what is going on here? And then I say to myself, I don't want this to happen ever again, But it really, when it happens to you, is when all of a sudden it really raises a lot of questions. And it's hard for one to say that to somebody, because someone that's never had those physical experiences, and I don't blame them, they will have those doubts. Anybody telling a story and say, well, I had this, and this happen to you, I wouldn't, because I'm a skeptic myself, I would be on the other side of that table and I would be like, well, is this person telling the truth? Is it a believable story? I don't know, because I haven't experienced it. But the only thing I can convey is once you've experienced it, you don't know what to believe anymore, because it throws everything up in the air. It just kind of says, okay, here, my so-called foundation that I was raised on just got taken out. So now, So now, what do I believe in? What is the truth? So I mean, we can go on and on about all that stuff, but before I start going,
yeah, the other fascinating a phenomenon that I have discovered, and this may be just more psychological, but it's still influenced by the supernatural, is that you will have people that will tell you, well, I've never experienced anything in my life, but there was this one time, and they'll tell you the most amazing story. Rob, it just came out in a show that we did when he was still doing the Leisure Hour with Jeff and Renee. He came out and just tells me this story that is one of the most amazing things I've ever heard about having this elongated conversation with something not physical. And
it's the most materialistic people.
Yeah.
Or not, I mean, most materialist people you've ever met.
I'm
the
in
most amazing stories.
I'm in New York City in Brooklyn, my friend is going to this hotel. He works as a chef in the hotel in Chattanooga. He is going to it's the same company. I don't know this lady that he is meeting that is also from our hometown in Brooklyn, New York. He makes this comment that I do this podcast and that I'm into all this stuff. And she just starts talking about, well, I was in California and I saw a UFO up in the sky. And just these are ordinary people going about their day, going about their lives. And everybody has had some kind, I think everyone has had some kind of weird
when you put
experience.
when you put it out there, people really will just confide in you, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
you
true.
just got to put it out there.
Right. And, as far as I'm concerned, you cannot deny their story in the sense that that's their experience.
It's an experience,
who am I to say?
Absolutely.
Right. And it changes people for better or for worse. It's an experience, and unless you've lived it, or been through it. And like now I'll say this, I have never had a UFO experience.
Me
at
neither.
least
You're not really.
one that's like profound, like, oh, here they come. Never. But anything that I've ever had happen to me has always been spiritual in nature, or AKA ghosts in nature.
Right.
And
Yeah,
when those things come, least expect it, I got to be honest. On like some level, I have no desire to go and hunt for ghosts or go into places that I know that I really don't. And this may be a stupid fear, but I don't want to bring it home.
Yeah.
I do. So I don't
not a
need
stupid fear.
Right. I don't need something hanging around my house. But to have an experience with somebody else and you are both experiencing the same thing, that's a mind for me.
That is where it really happens, because you can't second guess yourself. Because I had an experience when I was young. I think I was about 17 years old, and me and one of my best friends saw a like orb type of thing just fly through his backyard, and we just had that immediate look at each other in the eyes. What the hell was that? And to experience something like that with another person, where you can't just second guess yourself and what you might have saw, and like, no, it was something different, very different. That's very special experience.
Yeah, no, it's at my place of work, which I'm no longer there, but I was working in this place of business, which was a warehouse. Nothing special. At 4:30 every single day was when things started happening. And it was right when everybody left. And it was me, because I was running the place, and my warehouse manager, Jeff. And Jeff is he is an atheist in every sense of the word. Yep. And he could not he did not understand what was going on because of his own background.
Right.
He's like, what is this and what is happening? And what was occurring was, he got scratched, I got scratched.
Ooh.
Saw orbs, not big orbs. It was weird, about the size of like a dime, and you could see through them, and they were kind of just floating. But
total poltergeist stuff, though.
And I kind of regret doing this in a sort of sense, but we kind of started it up in the sense that there was something going on, and we were always agitating it to see if more could happen. And it started becoming a pest, because then it started setting off the alarm 2:00 in the morning, and then I'd have to drive from my house back to work and disarm the alarm system. And then the police were coming out, and now as a business, we were getting fined because the alarm, after so many, you start getting charged. So the CEO of the company was just like, I don't know what's going on here. Well, what am I supposed to tell the CEO? Well, I think I know what it is. It's the ghost, because, he would look at me saying, what are you talking about? So I couldn't really go there. But we had our phone system. It was draining. It had a backup battery that would drain. And it came to the point where I told my warehouse manager, Jeff, I said, we have to stop. I said, and in a certain sense, it was kind of fascinating and it was kind of fun, but I'm like, this is no longer fun. I said, we have to continue on working here. And when it happens, just let it do its thing, and we can both exist here, and we have to let it know. And that's kind of what we did. We're just like, what's ever here, we have to work here. You can continue on doing, just don't bother us. And that kind of somewhat took care of itself to a degree. I mean, we stopped getting scratched. But when you and someone else experience that type of stuff, it really changes a lot of things, because I was just never one to say, ghosts, are they real? Are they not real?
I couldn't deal with the scratching stuff. I've been touched, I think, but scratching, yes.
The scratch was tough. The instigating it one day and having your throat close on you, kind of like where you're almost getting sick and stuff like that, that was very bothersome. And then I had to run out the building, and then it kind of cleared up. There's a lot of bizarre strangeness, but I don't know what that is. At the end of the day, since now I'm no longer there. I moved on. We all moved on. I don't, to this day, I kind of still question. I don't want to go back because if I go back, I know the same stuff is going to happen, and I'm not going to get closer of getting any other answers. So it's going to be whatever it is. But at the end of the day, it does question my faith. Like, what is that? How is that defined? What is going on? So I don't know. I really don't know. Is it demonic? Is it just something that we just call a demon, but it's not really that simple? So it's.
I think we got to look at the definition of what a demon is. I mean, the definition.
Well, that's like
has changed.
You're
so much
talking
over
about
time.
the jinn stuff, and that doesn't
Yeah.
mean a demon, even though we might interpret that because of the civilization we come from. But
Right. I mean, I always thought in myself that that a demon was just a twisted angel, kind of like an orc is a twisted elf and the Tolkien stuff, But
Right.
that's actually really not what is even described even in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
A demon or a daemon, in some ways almost is a spirit, and that more than likely is a human spirit that is not a good spirit. And I've heard it explained even in the ghost researcher or the ghost hunter community as being that, look, if you're an asshole and when you were alive and you die, you're probably still going to be an asshole.
Yeah.
So that, and even in the Bible where, Jesus casts out the demoniac, that is even described, I think, if you look at the original language, that's almost implied that those are human spirits inside that body. Now, when you talk about a fallen angel, I think that's a completely different thing. But I've got some interesting. I've often thought about this whole idea of hell and what that is, and not necessarily as this place of fire and this whole the Dante's Inferno idea, but more of that hell is this place that is a separation from God, basically, and
like just a further devolution of consciousness.
These hauntings that are experienced in some of in these cases of violent hauntings, which I'm still really interested in, and a lot of you, if you listen to a lot of the some of the early days of Conspirinormal, I did a lot of shows about this. That there's this idea that you have all these human spirits, but you have something that controls them, and it's almost like being stuck here in this realm without your body that's basically a form of hell. You're just repeating these different tasks over and over again, kind of like in Greek mythology, the guy pushing the rock up the hill and all that.
From my perspective, that's very Buddhist.
Yeah,
too. That has a lot of correlation with Buddhism and the ideas of karma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
That's pretty wild. Yeah.
So
there's an element of it that I feel though that, I think, we the living need to keep on living. I don't know if it's meant for us to start bothering the dead, so to speak, if that's what it is.
Sure.
Because there is this cycle. There is some kind of journey that these, let's just call them dead folks, are on, and what tasks or whatever they have to accomplish, I don't understand it. Just like you said, there's like some type of cycle or repetitiveness or something.
Well, and I don't know if it's necessarily some embodied consciousness. I kind of lean more towards just like time mirrors and this being residue of past conscious beings and lives. I don't know if it's really their consciousness trapped in this realm or something like that. I think a lot of it is probably just some kind of residue or some either us accessing another time or them accessing us.
Which can fit in a little easily with this whole the ancient Egyptian idea of which I've been staring at this picture in here.
Absolutely. It's the soul being judged.
That the soul was basically there were three parts of the soul.
Yes, it's.
Don't ask me to describe them because I don't really remember them. I just remember that aspect. Yeah.
And that's all over. You know.
Are you guys Star Trek fans at
yes,
all?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love Star Trek. Yeah.
There was a Next Generation episode where they went to this planet, and there was this tar, and that was the episode where the Natasha Yar kind of got killed.
Yeah, because that's when Denise Crosby thought she was going to be big, making a lot of movies.
right.
And she did Pet Cemetery. I mean, you know.
But that whole storyline was about these beings that shedded, I guess, their evil or all their bad or, you know, whatever. They just left it all behind.
Yeah.
And it formed this type of, you know, black tar mass, you know, and it's, you know, and I just don't know if that's what it is in the afterlife. Is there a part of us that moves on, but we shed this skin that's all the bad? And is it that? You know, like I say, this stuff kind of just blows your mind because it just takes you in so many different tangents. And it's just fascinating. You know, it really is trying to figure it out. But I don't know if in this lifetime we're ever going to figure it out.
One of the things that I've not done a show on, and I really would love to get somebody on to talk about this, is the reincarnation stuff and the children that have
that's weird
memories of past lives.
Right, they were in World War II or Vietnam or
I mean, I don't know if you've read the book Soul Survivor. Now we always have to kind of preface this stuff and say, you know, if that's true, then that's pretty fascinating. But there's been, other than that child, there's been other kids that have said weird things. I mean, I had.
Oh, yeah, I've heard people's stories in my personal life.
We have a friend of the show that you may have heard on here, that she has a young child that I think is not yet 3, that, you know, she posted today about something weird that he said, you know, I woke up and I was a baby. And she asked, what were you before that? And he said something very strange, you know, like, what is that?
I had a friend tell me how his son told him, I was a soldier. He said, oh yeah, you were? Yeah. He said, yeah, before I died.
Well,
before. He's like 4 years old or some shit.
I'll tell you this. I've talked about this once on the show. When I was young, I have this memory in my head of, you know, there's hills, the sun is going down, and there's a group of people milling around, and I see this person on horseback with like the old kind of like the Napoleon kind of hat or the George Washington kind of hat. I can still vividly see this in my mind. Now, I don't know what that is. I can explain that away and say, well, maybe I saw War and Peace or some Napoleonic thing on TV, but you know, it's in color. My parents only had a black and white TV at that time. I don't know. I don't know what that is. I would like to think maybe I died in some battle somewhere, but I don't know. I don't know what that is, but it's a memory that somehow is in there. And then the next memory is my 3rd birthday party or something like that. You know, I can't explain it. I don't want to just jump to that conclusion of saying, well, I was some soldier that got blasted at Austerlitz or something, you know.
Hey man, aren't you proud to have died for Napoleon?
You died for France.
Waterloo. Or,
Yeah, but these type of things have happened again and again, and and it's odd to us in Western civilization, but in the East,
Oh, it's absolutely just like, yeah, of
course, you're on that, what the Hindus, you're on that wheel of samsara, and the Buddhists want to break that wheel, and it's a common thing there. They don't have. There's the doctor that has since passed on that I can't remember his name, but he actually went to India and would interview these children that would say, I was such and such person. And he would go, he'd do the research in the next village over, and that person existed.
I'm a casual Buddhist, but I'm very skeptical of reincarnation. But I mean, the monk I see every week from Sri Lanka was just talking about reincarnation last week, and just so matter of factly, like, all these animals that are just constantly cows and pigs and chickens and just slaughtered by the millions every year. They might have been humans. They didn't know what to do with it, so they just became a cow that gets slaughtered every year.
Yeah,
I was like, dang.
I think that's kind of imprinting a little bit of their religion, their kind of religion and their dogma on it. But
but it's just so normal to them.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to try to get on this doctor. That there's a doctor now that he goes, and the kids here in the United States that are saying this kind of stuff. But it's hard as a Christian to really rectify that with your Christianity, because Christianity, and in the Western tradition, it's you are
single
unique.
Ego that will be resurrected.
Exactly. You're unique. You are created spiritually by God. You're not just recycled through time.
And I think that's more than Christian. That's I think it's really a Western thing, pre-Christian, to think of
exactly
unique ego.
Yeah.
And it's something that I really battle with philosophically.
It's hard to rectify that memory that I have and all this other kind of strange proof from all these other children, and rectify that with my own belief system. Sure. So I struggle with that one. I honestly do.
Yeah, it's when it's your own experience and it's like a profound experience. I mean, how can anybody tell you to think something differently when you know it's there? When you know this is what happened to me. How can you explain it away? It's fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. You had mentioned Steve Huff, and I really didn't get a chance to really look at that stuff about the EVP. I'm not sure if that's the guy that.
No, that's the guy. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about the whole instrumental transcommunication and all that. I don't know what to think about all that stuff. EVP, I'm interested in that. Especially the origins of it with the Swedish guy who was recording birdsong, and he got voices that he didn't know where they came from. That's fascinating. And the instrumental transcommunication, that could be a totally different thing. And Steve Huff, that may be some guy when the Constantinos. Do you remember this when they were EVP experts, and he went and killed her and then killed himself. I think maybe it might have been Steve Huff that was like, "Oh, I've got them on tape." Really, he was really sensationalizing it and hopping on the bandwagon, and a little bit like, dude, have some respect.
The day of Burt Reynolds' death, he did something like that. That's on YouTube. What's the chef? The guy, the name escapes me. He was on CNN.
Bourdain.
Bourdain? Yeah. The day that guy dies, he tunes in his box. He's done Robin Williams. And, that's where he gets blown up. He gets blown up by people, and, he kind of just says, well, it's just hate mail and everything else like that. Where he lost me is that he sells I'll just call them like a wonder box. I don't know what exactly he calls them, but, he sells these for for $2,000 to $3,000. Okay. I mean, I don't know, when maybe it's legit. I don't know what all, goes in this box, but it seems quite charlatan to me, so to speak, and it's just like,
yeah,
it's like, it's Steve, you had me until you kind of said, well, if you want to get a hold of one of these boxes, go to eBay or sells them, and they're like $3,000 or whatever they are, it's just, but some of the recordings, I've got to say, they're very freaky. When you listen to them, it's like, again, maybe it's just me being a pussy, but it's just, when you hear these voices come out of this box, it's just like, man, that's kind of scary.
Oh, EVP's very compelling. And I'll tell you, I went through a phase. I got into the ghost hunting thing. I mean, I didn't ever actually, I have actively done it, but this was kind of after I was really interested in it. But I got into the EVP thing like crazy because I was like, man, what if you can actually prove that there's an afterlife? And I've since kind of walked away from that. But, I'll tell you this. I would listen to this stuff repeatedly. I got obsessed with EVP. Like I would listen to it. I would go to these websites. I would listen to it. Ghostly Talk would have a lot of these people on. And, I was married at the time, since divorced. And, my ex-wife, she's cleaning the mirror in the bathroom. She's kind of up on the sink area. Sure. And she feels something push her down. And after that happened, I got freaked out. I was like, okay, I'm going to stop this. Because I might actually be letting something in here. And, I think when you really get obsessed with it, and it's not necessarily the EVP or the Ouija board.
Yeah. What are you doing?
You become the channeler. You are bringing things in.
Yeah.
It's using you to come in. And I think that whatever happened, and it freaked me out. I'll be honest with you. That really freaked me out when she said that. And she didn't know I was listening to this stuff. She didn't know I was doing all this. And, I stopped. And, it still is interesting to me. It's still fascinating. But my other point about all that is that, guys like Steve Huff and some other people that they want to try to prove this stuff scientifically, I don't think you can. I don't think you can prove any. This is where I disagree, even with a good friend of mine that I just told you about, is like, you cannot prove this. This is not in a physical realm where you can actually use a scientific method to prove its existence. So when everybody tells me like, I've got this, I can prove this through this, I'm like, good luck. It's not going to happen.
Someone would have done it by now.
Yeah.
I will tell you, going back to my workplace experience, I took my iPhone and I was using it, and I did record a EVP where it said, "Get out." And it was quite troubling to hear that, and I still have my iPhone, and I still have that file, and I kept it. But to hear that say, "Get out," in a very haunting, guttural voice.
Hell no, dude.
Just like, but you did not hear it at the time with your own ears, but when you play back. And it was a situation where I wasn't asking questions. I just put my phone down and I recorded it. And then me and Jeff went into the warehouse away from it. So then when we came back, I said, well, let me play this thing back. Let me see if there's anything that, came on this thing. And then you hear the "Get out." And it was quite freaky, because, you're like, how do I duplicate this? Just like you say, how do you make this happen to where you can prove it? I know what I'm hearing when I play it back. It's clear as day, but it just leaves you with more questions than answers. And, I will say this, and this is not to go off topic because, this could be a whole segment in itself, but I will say this. It seems like people that have dabbled, and I can't prove this, but people that have dabbled in these areas, there's been some bad endings to people's lives or where they're going.
Yeah, I agree.
It just now I'm sure there's people. I mean, look at the Constantinos. That didn't end well. Dude from Penn State, he got himself all messed up in drugs, in hardcore drugs. What the hell? Ryan,
Yeah, Ryan Bull. Yeah.
There's some bad things, and I'm not going to blow up the guys from Ghost Adventures, but they're kind of going down a real bad path. I mean, if you watch the evolution of that show, there's maybe good intentions early on, but it's gotten quite bizarre. I know they're trying to, make the show and make stuff happen, and there's probably 12 hours for, the 40 minutes that they're trying to fill. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to make any types of predictions, and I hope, no one gets hurt or killed or whatever. But there's something, it seems like when you dabble in this stuff, there's not good endings.
When your whole idea is just to let in external, that's just, even if that is from a purely, we always talk about this because of my philosophical, stance, but in my philosophical ambiguity and agnosticism, I don't know how much, even if this is purely material, when you are welcoming the id of your mind or whatever you believe in Jungian archetypes or anything, if you are a materialist, then even those things can bring about madness, even if you are a materialist. So you're just opening up, and just welcoming madness.
You can get obsessed.
Yeah.
You I'm glad you mentioned that with the Constantinos, because that was kind of the elephant in the room. Yes. Whenever that happened. And, I don't know their lives. Obviously things weren't too well, but that was one of the things of just like, if you're going to explore this stuff, mess with this stuff, even John Tenney has told me, he puts on, we actually talked a little bit about this, of just how, you got to he puts some kind of protection around himself.
Oh yeah.
And when he goes into these places, and I think that that's probably a very important thing. And if you don't do that, and if you don't also step away from it and just explore the positive side of everything, then you're going to steep yourself into the negative, and that can have a big effect on you, on your mental health or your physical health. And this is why I think like the ghost hunting stuff for me, it just wasn't for me. Sure. Why I wanted, I wanted to do this. This is what I wanted to do. That part of it, but discussing it, great. But like actively engaging in some of these things, no. I mean, I think you have to be careful because you don't really know exactly what it is that you are really messing with. And I think the same thing goes with some of these people that now the occult has become a very popular thing now. And I think that a lot of these people that have gotten into this to say, oh, that's kind of cool, I'll get into that. Well,
sure,
you better be careful about what you're going to go through to get to, to get to this ultimate goal. And I think some of the stuff with the occult is fascinating and interesting, but there's some of it that really scares me. I'll be honest.
This is where I don't like where shows go, is when, again, maybe this is because of my Catholic roots or whatever. But when you start introducing occult, like, okay, for instance, like on the Ghost Adventures thing, they had this Halloween show, and now all of a sudden they've got witches on this show, and they're chanting and everything, and they're kind of glorifying it in a certain sense. Me personally, I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that. And
Sure.
I don't know. For some people, you got to really be careful, how you go about it, because it becomes like an obsession with this ghost hunting stuff. And it's always trying to get to the next, okay, I've got to get the next EVP. I've got to get the next picture. I've got to get, and you're always capturing, they seem like, you got all this time you're putting into this, hours and hours, just to capture one EVP. And it's just like, okay, I kind of look at how much time I have on my hands, and to say, okay, you spent 12 hours on a location to capture one EVP that said, no. I mean, really? I mean, it's just like, okay, now you captured it. You're not getting those 12 hours back. So, and then where are we now?
If we really want to talk about some amazing occult things, you're physically manifested being for those 12 hours in this universe with mental, spiritual awareness. I mean, it's like you're going to waste that on trying to find something that existed before, or, I don't know. I kind of think that people get a little obsessed too, like you're saying, and don't recognize the miracles around them, of life right now.
Right. They're too busy trying to prove
right
it.
on that. There's so much. You guys a couple shows ago had a guy on, and I can't remember his name, but he talked about the intelligent design.
Oh yeah, Dr. Y song. Yeah.
Yeah, that was like perfect. And you know what? If you want to know,
we'll have him back. By the way.
Oh, he was great. If you look at nature and how it's constructed, it's pretty hard for me to say that there is no supreme being just based on looking at nature and the order and everything. But it's just, man, that guy hit it right on the head. That was actually a really fantastic show that you guys put on there. That was really great guest. That was one of the better. Yeah, that was really awesome. Because the guy brings up some real good points. It's just like, I think at the end of the day, there's all this science and everything that we, can show, but, it just doesn't cross over to where, it really, what does it prove? Because people are still going to say, no, there is no supreme being. No, you can't convince those people, it's just, and why even waste your time, to a certain degree, it's just, sometimes life, you got to just go and live life. You got to enjoy life for what it is, because time on this is very short, right? I mean, shoot, I'm 47 years old, and I feel it's halfway over. Well, it is halfway over for me. I'm 47 years old. I mean, unless they come up with something that make me live to 200 man. I mean,
This is why when you, like the great philosopher Greg Bishop says that, do not engage. What's going on Facebook and like people trying to change each other's minds. Like, sorry guys, it's not going to happen. That's whether that's politically, socially, or even with the topics that we're talking about. It's just not going to happen. Unless
you're going to engage with like a troll. I mean, how many times are you going to go battle with some?
Everyone's experience is unique, and a lot of times people really don't mean to argue with each other. They just have different frames of reference and different language, and they're not even really arguing with each other, but it's just semantics.
Yep, just semantics. Yep, pretty much. Well, we have spent more time. I think we were going to try to do like 30, 40 minutes, but it's almost been like an hour and a half. So
time, as they say, I guess.
Yeah, well, this has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you, Jaco, for instigating it. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks a lot. We haven't had an interview of ourselves for a while. So.
Yeah. So this was good, to kind of get our own perspective on things. So
keep on doing what you guys are doing. You guys are doing a really good job, and like I'm enjoying it. So keep it going. Give me something to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we got more coming. There's we should have some good guests coming for 2019. So Dr. Future is next. So, all right,
Can't
sir.
wait.
Thank you so much.
All right.
We're going to close out this section, but we'll be back to close out the show, this marathon on Conspirinormal. All right. That was another marathon show with Tim Beckley and our listener, new friend, Jaco. I was very pleasantly surprised. We spent another hour and 30 minutes with him. That was supposed to be only a 30-minute segment, by the way.
Yeah, we really delivered. And, I mean, you guys are getting some serious entertainment hours and hours. I know it's helping you through your work weeks and work days. So just consider going to Patreon.
Yes, patreon.com/Conspirinormal. You can join there. If you don't want to have that recurring $3 a month, which, that's less than what I spent at Starbucks for a mocha frappuccino, by the way. I spent $6.
Hours and hours.
That's only
and
once.
hours and hours.
And I think Rob has counted them. I think there's like 17 Patreon segments on there now, which I'm going to throw up the ones from last week on there as we're recording this week. By the time you hear this, they'll be up.
That promise is what led me to become a patron.
Yes. And we're almost like $100 on there. So it pays for the show, but we'd like to pay for more. So please consider that. If you don't want to do that, you can go to conspirinormal.com. There is a donate button there for a one-time donation, as we say all the time. And also, if you would like, leave us a review, please. 5-star is preferable. That just brings us up in the rankings. So, all right, getting to the end of the year. Well, first of all, what did you think about all that tonight?
Oh, this is a great couple of shows worth tonight.
Yeah, you got 2 for the price of 1 yet again, by the way.
Yeah, that was
not intended,
wild.
but all right. We're hoping that Mr. Easy Street is going to deliver. But next week we've got Dr. Future coming on to end the year, but it doesn't end there, because the week after you will get to hear our year in review. So, guys, thank you for listening, and we will be back next week with Dr. Future on Conspirinormal. Cheese whiz.